Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the Surface Pro Audio side of Molten Music Technology. Today we're looking at the Microsoft Surface Pro 7. Now I've done a video on this before showing the initial setup, initial couple of tweaks and it working with music software. That was, I think, back in November. So now it's time to have a deeper look to see what it is this machine can actually do. Can it do anything? Is it any good for music production? Could it run a little studio, a little mobile live performance set, or could you use it just for making little tunes? Well, that's what we hope to find out. And so I'm going to be running a number of tests. I'm going to be playing some virtual instruments. I'm going to be running some audio. We're going to be making some tunes, maybe. We're going to test a bit of plugin counts, have a look at the temperatures and the CPU performance and the latency, all that jazz. Now I should probably start by saying that I've had this running, as I say, since October, November last year, and it's pretty much eaten up everything that I've thrown at it. I've reviewed different audio interfaces on it, I've reviewed different bits of software on it, plugged things in, I've been running stuff into my modular, into Bitwig, into Ableton, running Cubase, Studio One, lots and lots of different bits of software, and it's been, on the whole, completely fine. It's been, in fact, one of the most trouble-free surfaces that I've had to date, which is really nice. And it has the added bonus of having two USB inputs. I know, right? Extraordinary. So let me start by reminding you which surface I have and what version of Windows is on it and all that sort of jazz. The surfaces that I buy, the ones that I believe to be the sweet spot that sit there at good performance, good value and a good feature set is the i5 8GB. That's the one, at least I found, it's the one that I've bought every time. The i5, the 8GB. Now, do they compare to each other going all the way back to the Surface Pro 3, which was my first one? No, of course they don't. Each new generation of processor brings better technology and something different and hopefully an increase in power. But let me bring you in so you can have a look at the system properties. So hopefully you can see that. This is a Surface Pro 7. It's running an Intel Core i5-1035G4 CPU, which sounds exciting. Running at 1.1 GHz or 1.5 GHz. Not really sure what the difference is. Something about the minimum clock and a base clock or something, but we'll look at these clocks in a bit. It's got 8 GB of RAM. It's running Windows 10 Home version 1909. I did run a whole load of updates today, including firmware updates for the Surface, so make sure you have updated your system as far as it can possibly go. And the OS build is 18363.657. That is where we are. Now I hope you followed the tweaks on my previous video I did on the Surface Pro 7. The essential one to do is about power profiles, because as we know, these sorts of laptops are not designed for hardcore music production, of having processors and everything on all at the same time, all going for it, bashing out as much power as possible. They are designed to close down, to shut down, to extend battery life, to do occasional flurries of processing and then to disappear back down into sleepy mode. And so you have to stop that. And Microsoft don't really want you to stop that. They want their surfaces to run at maximum battery length with the sort of performance that bubbles along and increases as you do stuff and then comes back down again. They are aiming to retain it within a performance and temperature profile to get what they consider to be the best life out of this machine. We want to circumvent all that and stick it into high performance mode. So in power settings on your Surface Pro 7, it needs to be in high performance mode or ultimate performance mode if you follow the tweak that I did in the last video. I don't want to go into again exactly how you set that all up, but with a little bit of a registry edit you can get high performance mode to appear and then you can add a new power profile, select high performance mode, and that is going to sort out the majority of problems that you have on running a Surface or a system like this. Now, of course, running in a high performance mode is going to reduce the battery life of your system. Yes, it is. But please hear me when I say that for making music, the best chance, not the only chance, but the best chance of getting everything working right is to have it plugged into power, to have a high performance power profile activated, and to run it with an audio interface. That is going to be the best scenario for making music. Of course you can run it on batteries, of course you can run it on the onboard sound, but that's not what I'm interested in this particular instance. What I'm interested in is the best performance I can get out of this. Now, when you're running your Surface using other bits of software, other apps, other things, farting around on the internet, playing games, whatever, then by all means switch it back to a balanced performance profile. That's fine. But when you're making music, my recommendation is to run it on a high performance power profile. And there is one other tweak in there, which is to do with turbo mode, which we'll have a look at during the course of this video. But armed with all the information I've thrown at you so far, let's dig in and see what this fella can do. Now, just to go over the setup that I have here, my test setup, if you like. The Surface Pro 7 has these two USB ports, which is, you won't believe how extraordinary that is, because I no longer have to use one of these hub things and get lots of things plugged out of that, although perhaps I do if I'm still using dongles. But just to get an audio interface and a MIDI keyboard running, all you need is the two ports. Fantastic. That's all we need. No messing about. It's all powered off here. Fabulous. That's exactly what we want. Now, one of the ports is a USB-C port. Now, it just so happens that I've got a USB-C audio interface here. This is the Motu M2. And this, and its big brother, the M4, are, I have to say, probably the best audio interfaces of this type on the market at the moment. It's flipping fantastic, this thing. I love it. It's just, I mean, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I don't generally like this form factor, this little 1U thing with the fiddly knobs on the front. But even though it doesn't have a nice big knob on the top, which is what I generally like, these are fantastic. The latency is great, the performance is great, the little display on the front is great. They're made from metal, they're going to survive. Brilliant. Heartily recommended. And it's a USB-C connection, so it connects straight into the USB-C connection on the side here, leaving the regular USB port for something as mundane as a MIDI keyboard. How cool is that? Well, very cool, I think you'll find. So that's my setup. I'm using an audio interface because you can get a guaranteed low latency, good performance with it. Good sound, headphone sockets, microphone preamps, inputs, outputs, all that stuff, and it's powered from the Surface. Of course you could use onboard sound, but then you've got no input other than the built-in array microphone. Who wants to use that for music production? But I guess if you're just doing loops and stuff, then you can just use the onboard sound. That's fine, but this video is not going to be about that. I might make another one about it, or you can trawl through all of my previous Surface videos and check out the stuff on ASIO for All and using Wasapi drivers and all that stuff I've gone over time and time again. But for this video, sticking with ASIO, sticking with an audio interface, got a MIDI keyboard. That's enough talking about that. Let's have a look. So just to kick us off, I'm going to play a few virtual instruments using the keyboard, sustain pedal, and just let it go so that you can see a few different instruments being played and messed around with. Seems like a good place to start. Let's do that. So there you go. That was rather nice. Not getting any trouble, no audio glitching, no dropouts, no crackling or whizzing about. It's just handling it beautifully, stably, consistently, which are all really good words in this world, I have to say. Let me show you something else. How about a bit of VCV Rack? Because that's known as a bit of a CPU killer, at least at times, and perhaps this is something that you could run on your system to see how it compares. I don't know. So let's have a look. So this is a relatively large patch called Ochra, I think it is, that came from the VCV Rack community preset place, librarian place, the place where people put their own patches up. I'm just looking for something generative and interesting from there that uses all of the free modules, so I didn't have to try to find a particular module that people were using. And this is one of those, and it's beautiful. Now when you mess around in here, you can tell that it's struggling a bit because, you know, the screen updates are a little bit slow, moving around and things, but that's just the nature of this software. What I wanted to see was whether it could load a large patch and just run it without too much trouble. Under the engine, I've got this set to 4 threads. Could probably go further or less, depending on the sort of performance that you're after. VCV Rack isn't particularly fond of touch, so, you know, it's not what you want. What you kind of feel that you want is you want VCV Rack running on the surface, and then you'll be able to get in there with your fingers. Now that doesn't really work. You can to some degree on one thing or not, like that. But yeah, it gets a little bit fraught at times. See, I've now sort of pulled it apart. But suffice to say that there's room for VCV Rack. It can work really well. If you don't get tied up too much in knots over your touch interface, just use a mouse and keyboard. Because a Surface Pro 7 can do everything. It doesn't have to be touch. It can be a mouse and keyboard. I've got a mouse up here I could use. Look, this fella. And then, you know, don't have to be restricted. Don't feel that you're restricted to any kind of interface with this machine, because it will do it all. It will do it all. Right, so at this point I need to do a little bit of benchmarking. We need to get back into DAWBench, good old DAWBench, we love DAWBench. Vin over at DAWBench has been working on a new version, like a 2020 version, because there's all sorts of things going on in DAWs these days. There's sneaky things, sneaky buffer sizes, things not reporting right, things not working like ASIO guard or other bits and pieces that are messing around with all of the sorts of tests that you can do in the original, or at least in the last version of DAWBench. So he's been working bloody hard to try to come up with a better solution, moving away from Cubase into Reaper, I think, and he's putting together another DAWBench project so that we can all test our systems again and see where they are. But until that happens, I'm using the 2017 DAWBench test, and I use it at a very basic level. I'm not trying to generate a score for the machine. I just want to have a look at how many plugins it can run reliably. And again, you can go and get this project from dawbench.com and run it yourself and see how that compares to your system. So for this, I'll need my Cubase dongle, for which I don't have a USB port, which is a shame. So I'm going to take out the MIDI keyboard rather than use a hub on this occasion, because I'm not going to be playing the keyboard. And I'll stick this in instead. But joy upon joys, I can run Cubase and an audio interface just together using these ports. 2 ports on the side of a Surface. Anyway, right, so in the DAWBench Cubase project, what you have is a bunch of these compressors, the ReXCom standalone compressor, and you've got that running on 40 tracks of sine waves that are playing, and alongside that is a little musical tune. And what you do, you don't listen to the sine waves, you listen to that musical tune. And when the audio starts to break up, you know you've hit your limit of plugins, and then you back off, and there you've got how many plugins your system can run. Now, I should stress at this point that it's how many of these plugins this system can run at this latency and buffer setting on this audio interface with this combination of hardware and software. So it doesn't mean that you can run, oh look, it'll run 60 of these. That means I can run 60 massive multi-band compressor plugins. No. You can run however many of these that I do, and you have to somehow extrapolate your usage and compare that to what this is doing. So all this can do is give you an indication of what's possible with this combination of audio interface and surface at this level. Does that make sense? There's no way, because I get asked all the time, constantly, in the comments, people saying, yeah, but can I run this? Can I run this? Can I run this? How many of these can I run? The answer to that question is, I do not know. All I can do is demonstrate what it is doing at this point, and you have to think, oh, okay, so if it'll run 30 of those, maybe it'll run 5 of these big plugins. I don't know. Maybe try DAWBench out for yourself and see what sort of headroom you've got. That kind of thing. All I could do is give you an indication. That's what I'm trying to say. So don't give me a hard time over whether I'm absolutely specifying how many plugins the system will run of your plugins on your project. No, all I can do is give you an indication. That's what this is about. So what do? Well, we just hit play and we add plugins and take out plugins until it crackles. It's easy. It's easy. So at the moment we are running 80 plugins. 2 rows of 40 at the top here, and the indicator down here is a bit flashing all over the place because it does. And let's see whether we've got stable playback. Yes we do. Yes we do. So in that case I will rewind back over here to the beginning, track 1. I'm going to start adding plugins until it craps out, yeah? So that's 120 plugins down here. The load indicator is still good. It's still giving us a little bit of room. Let's see if we can add some more. Oh. So that was a glitch, but that may be because I was moving and scrolling across. That can have an effect. So let's keep going. There we go. So now it's maxed out. And it maxes out and you get a glitch, and now you have to sort of take plugins out until you can get a place where it's stable. So let's take that out. Okay, it's still jumping up. Let's take a couple more out, go back to 120. Okay, even though I've taken out some plugins, it seems worse. Now the reason for that is that we are using turbo mode. The processor is allowed to turbo boost itself up to ridiculous speeds and stuff which allows it to have a big load of headroom for loading plugins. But there's a bit of a problem with that. Let's have a look and see what's happened. So I've got some graphs here. Not entirely sure how helpful these are. I've not used these ones before, but it gives us a bit of an idea. You ignore the numbers on the left because they make no sense at all, but you can see the general idea of what's going on. So what's happened is, if you follow this curve, this is all our previous messing about, is that the CPU speed has increased, gone up as we've added more plugins, it's given us more and more headroom, and then at a point, boom, it drops, and then it's gone up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And so the result of that is that we've been able to load a whole load of plugins, and then we're going to have to unload a whole load of plugins to get stable playback back. Why? Well, it's probably going to have something to do with the temperature. If we look at this temperature graph, it's then going up as we load plugins. It hits a particular point up here, which is about 79 degrees, and then it goes, screw this, I'm going to have to clock the processor down, otherwise we're going to catch fire. And it is warm at the back. And so it clocks the processor down. We lose our headroom for loading plugins, and the whole thing starts to collapse back down again. So I'm going to keep on going and keep on unloading plugins to see which point we get to where we do actually get stable playback. Okay, we're going to have to wait for the temperature to get back up again, but as you can see, it's getting there pretty quick. There we go. So it hit about nearly 82 degrees, and now it's dropped down because it's clocked the processor down. Looked at performance again. See, it's plummeted. It went up here, it was fine. Now it's plummeted. So let's undo a bunch of plugins and see if we can get it under control. Okay, so the CPU temperature is stabilized at around 60 degrees. And that means that the processor speed has also stabilized. So according to the Task Manager Performance tab, the processor is 100% occupied and it's running at about 1.8 gigahertz, which is a little bit above the base speed of 1.5. Now, when it was using turbo, it could go up over 3 gigahertz. It could go twice as far as this, but it can't maintain it. And that's the problem that we have. So what's all this about? Well, this is our old friend turbo mode. It's the bane of all audio production on laptops and similar ultrabook type hybrid devices. It's always a problem. It's always a problem. You have that lovely bass clock, then you have all this potential turbo. The problem is that turbo can't be on all the time, not unless you've got like a big desktop system where you've got lots of cooling built in and you've set it up to be overclocked into that state with the right amount of airflow, the right amount of cooling, the right technology to sort that out. You can't do that with a laptop. Sure, I could stick a massive fan behind here or something in order to keep it cool. That would kind of work, but it's not very convenient. And so we're sort of left with this situation where if you leave turbo enabled, it can give you lots of headroom. I mean, you saw the playing of all those virtual instruments that we were doing. That is with turbo on as well, and it was completely fine. It wasn't troubling the processor, it wasn't getting too hot, it wasn't getting too full. You can play any individual synthesizer on here with no trouble at all, and you're not going to hit this overheating, clocking down, throttling problem, which is what we're seeing. However, if you're running a project and you want to be able to run a known number of plugins, then turbo mode is going to trip you up, because you could be sitting there on a cold day, for instance, playing along, adding more virtual instruments, adding more plugins, and not really hitting that temperature. And then the next day you open up the project and it's a warmer day, or you're warmer in your house or something, and suddenly you're hitting that temperature level, your processor is clocking down and your project no longer works. So what do we do? Well, we have to turn off turbo mode. That means that there's a whole load of gigahertz that we are saying no thank you to, because we want stable and consistent playback. At least I do. You don't have to. You can work with whatever you like. Like I say, you can leave turbo enabled and you can play your synth and that's fine, and you might not hit this problem, because in the DAWBench test we are pushing it to its limits. But if you want to have like a guaranteed level of stability and consistency, then I heartily recommend turning off turbo mode. And then it will work. You're not going to get as far, you're not going to be able to push up to 120 plugins like I was here, but you'll be able to get to a level that you can use all the time, every time. And it's not going to overheat, it's not going to throttle down, it's just going to stay consistently good. Does that make sense? Have I got that across, do you think? So in some ways you think, oh, but there's all this stuff, all these gigahertz that I can't use. That's not fair. No, it's not. It's not fair. But that's the nature of the processors that are in this sort of system, and other laptops too. In all laptops, they do that kind of thing. It's only if you're running a desktop system can you really take advantage of turbo mode in a consistent, continuous way. So let me show you what I mean. If we go back to our power settings, our advanced power settings in here, you go down to, once you've enabled the high performance mode and you've switched the CS enabled switch as in my previous video, so check out my previous video if you don't have access to these sorts of settings, and then you will. So go down to processor power management, minimum and maximum processor state. Set these to 99%. When they're at 100, it will run turbo mode. Set it to 99% and it won't. It will restrict it to its base clock to some degree. There seems to be a little bit of argument over that. Sometimes it's base clock and a little bit more, but we'll have a look at that as well. So set it to 99%, hit that, and we now have a CPU speed of around somewhere between 1.1 and 1.5 gigahertz. Now that seems really slow. It feels slow. Oh, that's going to be really slow, but it's going to be consistent. So let me run the test again and see how many plugins we're going to get every time. So we're now down at 75 plugins. 75. I mean, we're up to 120 at one point. Yeah, I know. But 75 plugins. Looking at the processor speed here, it's now staying constant. It is staying absolutely where it should be. Oh, a little glitch there. Well, you know, I could perhaps back off one more plugin. It would be about right. So I've got a constant CPU speed. It's no longer going up and down, which is what was causing the dropouts before. If I go to the temperature, this is also pretty much flatlined. It's come up a little bit since we started because I've now got it running properly. And it's not going to go anywhere near this 80 degrees. It's not going to start clocking down. It's not going to start throttling. It just is. Beautiful. See, the CPU is now at about 90%, it says. It's running at 1.4 gigahertz. I tend to find that that's what it ends up being on, 1.4 gigahertz. That seems to be what the processor just defaults to when you turn off turbo mode. So there's none of this wanging up to 3 gigahertz and back. It's just 1.4 gigahertz. And that's given me 75 plugins. Is that any good? Does that make sense? Are you following me on this? Because it's really quite important. And it's also important to stress that you do what the heck you like. You know, you leave turbo mode on and see how far you can stretch that before it starts to throttle. You can try installing software like Throttle Stop in order to stop it throttling. That doesn't really work, at least in my experience. You could try using the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility, except it will not install on the Surface Pro 7. So you are left with basic tools. The basic tools are to turn turbo either on or off. Once you've set a high performance power profile, that is sorting out most of the main issues you have with a laptop like this. Once that's set, then you can use how much CPU you want to use. If you want to use it with turbo mode on, do that, and you'll be able to go so far and then you'll have to pull it back. Or you can turn off turbo mode and use it as a moderately powered device within the constraints of that, but it will be consistent, it will be continuous, it will work every time, it'll be stable, and you know where you are with it. So the last question is then, can you make music on it? Well, of course you can. Let's make some music. So what was this project running then? Well, it was running a Spitfire Labs drum kit. It was running some strings from Kontakt. Those are all sample based, streaming off the hard drive. It was using a Minimoog thing from Arturia, a CPU based synthesizer, along with the much larger and deeper pigments. It was also using a synthesizer from Reason. Combined all that with a big reverb, a few delays. I was also running an amplifier for the guitar that I plugged in and played over the top. So all of those things can give you an idea of what the system can do. Looking at the DSP performance graph here, if I set it playing again, there's plenty of room for more. Let's try another project, this time in Studio One. What I've done, I've loaded up a bunch of drum tracks just as audio, and I've added some Presence XT, which is a sample-based instrument, and some of their software synths, Mai Tai and the Mojito. And these are all the Presonus built-in instruments, so I'm not adding any third-party ones in this case, just to see what Studio One can do, and you can then again compare at home to some degree. I've also added some delay and some reverb just to give it a little bit of something, and it sounds a bit like this. I know, you just can't believe the level of talent that exudes from me. So let me bring you in and I'll show you exactly what we're looking at, and let's see if we can keep duplicating tracks to the point that the whole thing just falls over and breaks, and then we'll have some idea of the performance of the system. So we've got some drum tracks playing audio. We've then got these strings on the Presence. Each of one is playing several voices all at once. These are things like the cello full and the viola and violin multi-samples. And then further down I've got a bit of a bass line on the Mai Tai here. It's in there somewhere. And something on the Mojito as well, that lead sound that you're hearing. And then what I've done is I've duplicated these tracks so that we have more and more of them playing. Currently we have 48 tracks. Now 6 of those are the drums at the beginning, so that leaves us with 42, and half of those are the synth based ones, so that's 21 21 of the Mai Tais and Mojitos and 21 of the Presence, with all of the orchestral library running. Currently the CPU is brought itself up to about 1.4 when it's in playback, and the amount of CPU being used is about 70%. So let's duplicate a bunch more synths. Okay, I think we've now hit our limit, because you can hear the glitching, yeah? So we can see in the CPU meter it's got up to about 80%. I mean, generally speaking, you'll find that 70 to 80% of CPU usage is the point at which things start glitching. Because as a system, it's not going to let you use 100% of the CPU. It doesn't quite work like that on a Surface. And so at the moment we are on the edge of what's capable. If I was to bring out a couple more of these. So there you are. That's pretty good. That's pretty stable. I'm well impressed with that. I think that's a good demonstration of what's possible. I've got nearly 50 tracks of virtual instruments and virtual sample playback and audio and some effects all running within Studio One on the Surface Pro 7 on the i5 8 gig. That's pretty good. I got another musical marvel for you, this time in Ableton Live. I've done a couple of channels of drum kits. I've done a bit of wave tabling within Ableton Live, and then I've added a few Arturia synths. I've got the Fairlight in there, I've got the stage piano, I've got the CZ101, that kind of thing. It's already grooving up quite high on the processor because these are quite processor intensive virtual instruments. But hey, it's what we've got. So are you ready? So I'm going to set this going, and then I'm going to hopefully try to duplicate a few to see at what point it all falls down. Getting a bit of grumbling in there now. Yeah, I think it's had it. I think it's had it at that point. As I say, when your CPU meter gets to about 70 to 80%, that's the point at which it all starts to crumble. But let's have a look at what we got. We had a couple of audio tracks, as I say, and then I've got 4 of the Ableton Live wavetables bumping along. I've got 4 of the Arturia Fairlights. I've got 3 CZ101s. And another 3 stage pianos, and they're quite CPU intensive. You can play the stage piano on some older surfaces and get crackles just by playing that one synth. So this is pretty good. I mean, that's 16 channels, 16 tracks of virtual instruments in Ableton Live, hefty ones, doing hefty stuff, going round and round. So I hope that is another indication of what the Surface Pro 7 is capable of. So bringing this all back to some kind of conclusion then, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that the Surface Pro 7 is a half decent piece of kit. It runs well. It copes well with audio software. It copes well with audio interfaces, with MIDI controllers. The 2 USB ports are superb. It's what you need. It's what you need on a device like this. It's really enormously helpful. It can handle low latency playing from a keyboard. It can handle virtual instruments in a performance space. So if you were running a few instruments you wanted to run in a gig or something like that, you could run it absolutely on the Surface and play them without too much trouble. If you wanted to make music, you could put together tracks of stuff using synths, using audio, using whatever you like, and it will eat it up. The only thing you have to work on really is whether you want that turbo mode engaged or not. You may find that it's helpful, it gives you enough room for what you want to do, or you may find that it's just too erratic and you need to kind of bring it down to that 1.4 gig bass clock. And while that is to some degree annoying, that's just how laptops are these days. So I really hope that's given you some idea of what the Surface Pro 7 is capable of. And remember, if you're using a different DAW or different instruments, you've just got to use a little bit of your brain power to see how that translates to what you're doing. Because I'm not going to be able to answer the question of, oh, will it run my Pro Tools project? Because, yeah, probably. It just depends on how much stuff you've got going. Oh, will it run my Ableton Live project? Yeah, probably. It just depends how much stuff you're running. Yeah? So I hope that was helpful, and if you find these sorts of videos helpful, then do feel free to like, to subscribe, to share it about the place, to tell people about the multimedia technology way of getting under the skin of bits and pieces and give them out to you in YouTube land. Or if you're feeling particularly daring, you can come and join my little Patreon team. Throw me a couple of dollars. That would be nice. It really helps support what I do here and helps encourage me to produce better and better content. And coming up next, I have this. What's this? This is the Surface Pro X. What's that going to be like? Well, that's going to be my next video, so stay tuned. Coming very, very soon to this channel. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.